Long ago, in the mighty kingdom of Oke-Ade, where crowns were heavy with gold and thrones carved from the bones of old kings, there lived a ruler whose hunger for power knew no bounds. His name was King Adeyemi, a man whose very birth was said to have been prophesied by the gods. But if the gods had truly chosen him, they had chosen a man of great greed. Adeyemi did not seek wisdom, nor did he seek justice. He sought strength that no man, no army, no spirit could challenge. His kingdom was already vast, his people already prosperous, but prosperity was not enough. He wanted dominance. He wanted his name to be whispered in fear. And so, on a night when the moon hid its face behind thick clouds, King Adeyemi rode deep into the forbidden forest, where even the bravest hunters dared not step. It was said that spirits lurked there, ancient beings older than the land itself. Some granted fortune, others demanded blood. He rode alone, his royal cloak dragging in the damp earth, his heart pounding with a hunger greater than fear. Then, deep within the heart of the forest, where the air was thick as smoke and the trees whispered secrets of old, he found it. A spirit. It did not have a face, only two golden eyes that burned like dying suns. Its voice was neither loud nor soft, but it rumbled through the air like the voice of the world itself. You seek power, king of Oke-Ade. Adeyemi did not ask how it knew his name. He only nodded. I do. And you will give anything for it. Anything. The spirit laughed, a sound like distant thunder. Then it spoke words that would bind the king's fate forever. Then hear my price, you will have wealth beyond measure. Armies that bow at your feet. Enemies who will tremble at the sound of your name. But the wind howled through the trees. Your first child will be cursed. A daughter. She will hunger for manhood. Every full moon, she will take the strength, honor, and life force of a man. Adeyemi's hands clenched. A daughter. A curse. But the spirit's voice wrapped around him like a spell. You will be powerful, king of Oke-Ade. But your blood will carry the cost. The king did not think. He did not hesitate. Greed had long since drowned whatever conscience he once had. I accept. The forest shuddered. The spirit's laughter roared through the trees. And the deal was made. Years later, when a baby girl was born in the palace, the drums of Oke-Ade thundered in celebration. She was named Abeni, meaning we asked for her, and she came. But the people did not know what price had been paid for her birth. They did not know that their king had already sold her soul. Abeni was beautiful. Her skin was dark and smooth, eyes deep like a river, always full of sadness. She moved like the wind, soft and quiet. When she smiled, it was rare, like a small light in the dark. But behind her beauty was pain. Abeni was not free. The people of Oke-Ade loved their princess, but they did not see her often. She stayed inside the palace, hidden behind tall walls. The king said it was for her safety, that a princess must be protected. The people believed him. But the truth is much worse. The secret curse. Abeni lived in a small chamber deep inside the palace. The room was simple, just a mat to sleep on and a small window high on the wall. She could see the sky but not the land. She could hear the birds but never touch the trees. Every day, she sat by the window, whispering prayers to the gods. But the gods never answered. Every full moon, her nightmare returned. The palace guards would bring a man, a strong warrior, a hunter, sometimes even a noble. They would push him into a secret chamber beneath the palace. And there, Abeni would feed on his manhood. She did not want to. She hated it. But the curse inside her was stronger than her will. When it happened, her body shook, her breath became heavy, and a deep hunger burned inside her. She could not fight it. The moment she took what she needed, the man would cry out, not just from pain, but from something worse. When it was over, the man was empty. His manhood was gone. And Abeni. She would curl up on her mat, pressing her hands to her face, and cry until morning. Outside the palace, the people of Oke-Ade were afraid. At first, they did not notice. A hunter would leave for the forest and never return. A strong farmer would suddenly go missing in his farm. A warrior who had never lost a battle would go missing in his own home. But as time passed, the people began to whisper, "Where are our men? Why are the strongest among us going missing? Is it a curse?" The fear spread. Some believed the gods were punishing them. Others thought there was a dark spirit in the land. But no one suspected the palace. And that was because King Adeyemi played his role well. The king stood before his people, his face full of false sadness. "My people," he said, "I feel your pain. I, too, have heard of the missing men. I swear to you, we will find the truth." The people believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was their king, their protector. They did not know that it was his guards who took the men. They did not know that the palace itself was the source of their sorrow. And they did not know that the princess they loved was cursed to feed on manhood, trapped in a fate she could never escape. Far beyond the palace walls, where the rivers ran free and the forest stretched wide, a young hunter named Adisa lived with his family. His name meant, "one who is clear and honest," and he carried that name with pride. His bow was swift, his eyes sharper than an eagle's, and his heart was bound by the unbreakable chains of justice. The night was still, the kind of stillness that made the hairs on the back of Adisa's neck rise. The forest whispered around him as he crouched low behind the thick trunk of an iroko tree, his bow steady in his hands. He had been tracking a wounded antelope, its trail of broken branches and blood guiding him deeper into the woods. But what he saw instead froze him in place. At the edge of the forest, where the trees parted just enough to give him a view of the open plains leading to the village, shadows moved. Men. Palace guards. Adisa's grip tightened around his bow. What were they doing here, so far from the palace, so deep into the night? Then, his heart nearly stopped. Between them, bound at the wrists, was his brother, Adeyemi. Adisa's breath came slow and measured, but inside, his mind raced. Why? Why had they taken him? The palace did not make public arrests, not of warriors like Adeyemi. If a man was taken, it was done in silence. In secrecy. And no one ever returned the same. Hidden by the night, Adisa inched closer, stepping with the care of a hunter. His hand grips his bow tightly, fingers trembling ever so slightly over the worn wood, ready, though he knows now is not the time to strike. Beyond the blurred edges of the tree, just out of focus, his brother Adeyemi stands bound at the wrists, flanked by the armed guards. The torches illuminate their figures, but to Adisa, it is as if the entire world has faded except for this moment, this terrible, impossible moment. The forest around him is alive with whispers, the rustling of leaves blending with the distant crackle of fire. Adisa knows he must stay hidden, must think before he acts. But the fire in his chest burns hotter with each passing second. His brother is a prisoner. And he is running out of time. Adeyemi did not struggle. He walked with his head high, his back straight, but Adisa knew his brother. He could see the fury simmering beneath the surface. Then, as they reached their horses, Adeyemi did something unexpected. He turned his head, just slightly, and for the briefest moment, his eyes met Adisa's in the darkness. A silent message passed between them. Stay away. But Adisa had never been good at following orders. The moment the guards disappeared into the night, he moved. Not back home. Not to the safety of the village. But after them. Because if the king thought he could take Adeyemi under the cover of night, never to be seen again, he was wrong. Adisa would find him. Even if it meant walking straight into the lion's den. The palace of Oke-Ade stood tall and proud, its red brick walls stretching high into the sky. It was a place of beauty, but within its walls, darkness lurked. Adisa was no fool. He knew that walking through the front gates meant certain death. Instead, under the cover of night, he slipped past the outer guards, climbing the walls with the agility of a wildcat. He had spent his life moving through the forest, stalking prey, hiding from dangerous beasts. He knew how to be silent. Once inside, He moved carefully through the grand halls, ducking behind pillars and weaving through corridors. The palace was a maze of secrets. Servants whispered to one another in hushed tones. Guards stood stiff at their posts, their eyes sharp. And yet, something felt wrong. Then, he heard it. Soft sobs. Following the sound, Adisa found himself before a small wooden door. The sobs came from within. Slowly, he pushed the door open, stepping into a dimly lit chamber. And that was when he saw her. The Princess Abeni. Abeni sat near a tiny window, her knees drawn to her chest. The moonlight bathed her in silver, making her look almost otherworldly. She was beautiful, yes, but there was pain in her eyes. A deep, soul-crushing sorrow that made Adisa's breath catch. She turned sharply at the sound of his footsteps, her eyes widening in alarm. "Who are you?" she whispered. Adisa stepped forward cautiously, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "My name is Adisa," he said. "I've come to find my brother." At those words, her face paled. She hesitated, her lips trembling. "I am so sorry." Adisa frowned. "Where is he?" She shook her head. "It is not something I can explain, not in the way you wish to hear it." Her voice was thick with guilt. And suddenly, Adisa understood. He had heard the rumors. The whispers of a princess who fed on the manhood of men. He had not wanted to believe them. But now, standing before her, he saw the truth written all over her face. "You," he breathed. "You took my brother's manhood." Abeni's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I did not ask for this," she whispered. "I did not choose this life." Adisa's jaw clenched. He should have hated her. She was the reason for his brother's suffering. The reason for so many men's downfall. And yet, looking at her now, he saw not a monster, but a prisoner. A girl cursed before she was even born. A girl who had never truly lived. His anger wavered. Abeni wiped at her tears and turned to face him fully. "If you wish to punish me, I will not fight you," she said softly. "But know this, I, too, wish to break free from this curse." Something in her voice made Adisa pause. Truth. Desperation. Hope. A long silence stretched between them. Then, at last, Adisa took a deep breath. "I do not wish to punish you, princess," he said. "I wish to end this nightmare." Abeni's lips parted in shock. You would help me?" He nodded. For the first time in her life, someone saw her, not as a monster, not as a tool for her father's greed, but as a person. And just like that, the hunter and the cursed princess became allies. Adisa's steps were heavy as he made his way back through the dense forest, the night pressing in around him. The weight of what he had learned sat in his chest like a stone. His brother was gone. The princess was cursed. And the king was the true monster. The old whispers had been true. The king of Oke-Ade fed on the strength of men through his own daughter. Adisa had wanted to hate her. He had tried. But the pain in her eyes was real. She was not his enemy. She was a victim, just like Adeyemi. By the time he reached his village, dawn was breaking. He did not return to his mother's hut or seek comfort in the company of the elders. Instead, he sat by the river's edge, staring at his reflection in the water. What am I to do now? A voice echoed in his mind, Abeni's voice. I, too, wish to break free from this curse. Adisa exhaled sharply. If she truly wanted freedom, he would give it to her. But first, he had to be patient. He could not act rashly, not when the king's eyes were everywhere. Over the next few weeks, Adisa and Abeni met in secret. He would slip past the guards, scaling the walls with practiced ease, and she would be waiting for him in the dimly lit chamber where they had first met. At first, their conversations were brief, cautious. Adisa asked questions about the palace, about the guards, about the rituals that drained the warriors of their strength. Abeni told him everything she knew. Each stolen moment brought them closer to understanding the king's dark magic. But something else happened, something neither of them had expected. Their stolen moments turned into longer conversations. Conversations turned into shared laughter. Laughter turned into soft smiles and lingering gazes. Adisa found himself drawn to her, despite everything. She was unlike any royal he had ever met. She did not carry herself with arrogance. She did not look down on him. And Abeni, for the first time in her life, felt seen. Not as a cursed princess. Not as a tool. But simply as Abeni. One night, as they sat near the small window, Abeni turned to him. "Why do you keep coming back?" Adisa met her gaze. He could have lied. He could have given her 100 different reasons. But instead, he spoke the truth. "Because I believe in you." Abeni's lips parted slightly, her breath hitching. No one had ever said those words to her before. And that was the night everything changed. The decision was made in whispers beneath the stars. "I will get you out of here," Adisa told her. "On the night of the next full moon, I'll come for you. Be ready." Abeni stared at him, her heart pounding. Freedom. Could it really be possible? Her hands trembled as she reached out, lightly touching his fingers. "You promise?" Adisa nodded. "I swear it." Tears burned in her eyes. For the first time, she had hope. But hope is a dangerous thing in a cursed palace. That same night, Abeni could not keep her secret to herself. There was only one person in the palace she truly trusted, Ifeoluwa, her servant and closest companion. Ifeoluwa had been by her side since childhood. She had wiped her tears on the nights the curse felt unbearable. She had held her hand through every ceremony, every dark ritual. And so, Abeni told her everything. The plan. The escape. Adisa. Ifeoluwa listened, her face unreadable. Then, she took Abeni's hands in hers. "You deserve to be free, my princess," she whispered. "I will help you however I can." Abeni smiled, relief washing over her. She had trusted the right person. But trust is a fragile thing. And Ifeoluwa had secrets of her own. That same night, after Abeni had gone to sleep, Ifeoluwa slipped out of her chambers. She moved swiftly through the palace corridors until she reached the heavily guarded door. Inside, Prince Aberi reclined lazily on a pile of silken cushions, a goblet of palm wine in his hand. His dark eyes flicked to Ifeoluwa the moment she entered. A slow smirk spread across his lips. "I was beginning to wonder if you had forgotten about me," he drawled, setting his goblet aside. Ifeoluwa knelt before him, her pulse racing. "I could never forget you, my prince," she murmured. He reached for her, trailing a hand down her arm. "Then why do you look troubled?" Ifeoluwa hesitated. Abeni's words echoed in her mind. The promise of freedom. But Prince Aberi was not just the king's son, he was her lover. And she knew, deep down, that if Abeni escaped, it would be the end of everything. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. "I have something to tell you." Prince Aberi leaned in, his smirk widening. "I'm listening." And just like that, Abeni's only ally became her greatest enemy. The night of their escape arrived. Abeni wore a simple cloak, hiding her royal clothes beneath it. Her heart pounded as she stepped out of her chamber. She tiptoed past the sleeping guards, her breath shallow with fear. Adisa was waiting for her at the secret passage. He smiled when he saw her, and for a moment, everything felt right. "We are almost free," he whispered, taking her hand. But just as they stepped toward the exit, a loud whistle cut through the night air. "The princess is escaping," a voice shouted. Torches flared to life. Guards surrounded them. Adisa drew his knife, ready to fight, but there were too many of them. Abeni's heart sank as she saw Prince Olekana stepping forward, a cruel smile on his face. Beside him stood Ifeoluwa, her eyes cast downward in shame. "You thought you could leave?" Aberi sneered. "Father will decide your fate." The guards seized Adisa and Abeni, dragging them back into the palace. King Adeyemi sat on his high throne, his face filled with fury. The great hall was silent as the prisoners were brought before him. "Abeni," the king said, his voice shaking with anger. "You have disgraced this family. And you, Adisa, dare to steal my daughter. She is not yours to control," Adisa said boldly. "She is not a prisoner." The king's face darkened. "You will regret those words." He turned to Abeni. "You will feed on his manhood. You will obey your curse." Abeni's eyes filled with tears. "No," she said firmly. "I will not do it." The king's fury erupted. He stood, drawing his sword. "Then I will take care of him myself." He raised his sword high, ready to strike Adisa down. But before the blade could fall, Abeni let out a cry and grabbed the sword from one of the guards. Without hesitation, she plunged it into her own chest. A gasp filled the room as she staggered backward, blood staining her dress. Her breath came in short gasps as she looked at her father. "It ends here," she whispered. "No more stolen manhood. No more curses." The king froze. His body trembled as he dropped his sword. A deep pain filled his chest, as if his own life was slipping away. He stumbled, clutching his heart. The bond between him and Abeni, the bond forged by the dark deal, was breaking. With one last shuddering breath, he collapsed to the floor. The great hall fell into silence. The curse was broken. The priests were summoned. After seeing what had happened, they declared, "The curse has been lifted. The gods have taken back their justice." The people of Oke-Ade, hearing of the king's death and Abeni's sacrifice, rose up against the royal family. Prince Abeni tried to run, but the people stopped him. The elders of the land gathered and made a decision. The royal family of Adeyemi is no longer welcome in Oke-Ade. They must leave this land forever. And so, the royal family was banished. As for Ifeoluwa, the people turned their backs on her. No one would give her food, work, or shelter. She was left to wander alone, starving and forgotten. The palace was left empty, a reminder of the dark past. But Oke-Ade itself began to heal. The people no longer feared the full moon. The land that had been ruled by a cursed king now belonged to the people once more. And though Adisa's heart was broken, he knew that Abeni's sacrifice had given them all a new future. Her name was never forgotten. Each year, on the night of the full moon, the people gathered beneath the stars to tell the story of the brave princess who had given her life to break a curse. And so, the kingdom of Oke-Ade entered a new era, one of peace, freedom, and the memory of a love that had been strong enough to end the darkest magic.